They don't accept bribes. They don't offer. I'm ready for that. Because I see a lot of laxity going on, not just with the leaders, even with us, the people, we're sacrificing our own personal pursuits. And two, are we ready to follow law and order? Not for personal interest, but truly serving the people. Are we going to find amongst each other honest and virtuous leaders? Hello everyone, welcome to the House of Thought, the virtual fireside for conscious Pan-Africanists. Here we gather around the hearth, the fireside, and we reflect on our issues and consider how we can take action as major actors of our own development. So if you're following the news, chaos seems to be the order of the day across multiple countries in Africa. And it's different countries, but similar stories of political uncertainty, economic struggle, and a rising wave of discouragement. As you must have noticed, this year is an electoral year for many African countries. And it appears to me that there is a common theme across the board, which is a leadership crisis. And you might be thinking, well, there's always a leadership crisis, and that would be true. However, if you're paying closer attention, you'll notice that the particularity of this year lies around the youth reaction. And a few dishonorable mentions would be Madagascar, Cameroon, and Tanzania. You see, on the one hand, electoral disputes, on the other hand, youth protests, and to zone in on Madagascar, the youth successfully, together with the army, ousted the former president. And chaos seems to be reigning, and a case that personally breaks my heart is Sudan, right? And that would be beyond poor leadership. That is pure evil like we have never seen before, but that's a separate conversation we must have. So back to our topic at hand, it seems that we're battling terrible leaders on the one hand in some countries, the militia versus the military in other countries. At the same time, we're struggling with hunger crisis, lack of basic human needs. And what are we left with? Young people taking it to the streets, pretty much. So that's the stage in Africa right now. You look to your left, you look to your right, chaos everywhere. And for certain, we are going to hold our leaders accountable, as we should. But for a few minutes for today's conversation, let us park that aside. Okay, let's park our leaders aside. Let's park aside the colonizers, and let's talk about the young people. And let's brainstorm a little bit. What is the role of the youth in all of this, if any? Many people have the opinion that, the average person can't do anything. Let's pause, or rather, tell me in the comment section before we go on to our conversation. Do you believe that the youth can or cannot do anything about the leadership crisis and the situation happening right now across the continent? Let's talk about that. So, most of our leaders have been in power for a very long time, meaning they got involved very young. I'm talking late 20s, early 30s, and we for sure can have the age debate, but I strongly believe that whether it is a young leader, an older leader, a female, male, it doesn't matter. A good leader solely relies on performance. If you look at President Paul Biya of Cameroon, he became president when he was 49 years old, but he came into government in general pretty young, in his early 30s, if not late 20s. In Madagascar, the former president, André Rajol, was president at the age of, 34 years old, and was ousted. By the time he was ousted, he was 51 years old. That was fairly young, right? And we have our current trending Tanzanian president lady, who people refer to as the female dictator. So it's not really a matter of age, or it shouldn't be a matter of age, of gender. Of course, the fact you have the mental capacity to rule a nation, that's what we should focus on. But yeah, my point being, most of our leaders have been in power from the time they were really young. And so the African population is, a rough estimate is about 1.5 million inhabitants. And the active population is estimated to be about 45% of that. the active population being the people within the working age, or the working age group, right? Which is typically between the ages of 25 to 65, more or less, depending on where you're from. And 65 being like the average retirement age, but only 5% of that total African population are over 65 years of age. So if the young people are, as we all know, it's a youthful population, but the young people, the 1.5 of the 1.5 billion Africans, around 45%, which is perhaps 700 million, are in the active population range. Why does it seem to me that we cannot find a leader who is befitting? Because, as I said earlier, everywhere seems to be, there's a leadership crisis across the board. And we often talk about the curse of natural resources, but we need to start talking about the leadership curse. Why can't we find leaders that can serve us faithfully? So that's the premise. And now back to the conversation around the young people. Are we ready for change? Or are there among us befitting leaders? Are we ready to sacrifice our pleasure for change? I'd like us to talk about that. I'd like us to understand that radical change requires rigor, right? Are we ready for that? What kind of leaders do we need? This is a serious question. What kind of leaders do you think Africans need? And I'm not talking about all the heads of state. I'm talking about every single level of the government institutions. So the head of state and everything else. What kind of leaders do you think we need? I'd like us to unpack a few things here, starting with our ideals, right? We all say we want a certain Africa. We all say we want development, we want innovation, we want a revolution, Africa's rising. But change is not just about vibes, as we say nowadays. It's discipline, it's sacrifice, it's discomfort. Are we ready for that? We can admire countries like China, Dubai, Singapore. I'm like, oh, why can't Africa be like that? But are we admiring just the results without paying attention to the discipline that was put in place? Are we doing that? So I'd like us to reflect for a second, because right now on the continent, it appears to be that juvenile delinquency is the order of the day. There's a severe lack of discipline, and we've lost or we seem to be losing our values on different fronts. We want transformation, but do we want the rigor that comes with it? Are we willing to abandon some of our practices and our behaviors? So I'd like us to kind of set the scene of what real nation building would look like. First, rule of law, merit over connection. We execute culture and our tradition and our morals, and we're not corrupt. How about that? We hold ourselves accountable at every single level. We have key performance indicators, and we're bound by those performance indicators. Are we ready for that? I'm thinking, because even though a youth movement is important to show change, but we don't only need passion, we need purpose. And today I see, there's protests. Of course, there shouldn't be anything wrong with a peaceful protest, but we know the nature of our leaders. And I must stress the importance of peace as a foundation for prosperity. We cannot build in chaos. We cannot industrialize when insecurity reigns. And we shouldn't be encouraging violence. We shouldn't be encouraging chaos. Where have our morals gone to? Are our leaders just busy chasing other things that there's no discipline, no rigor, no ethics? These things have to be taught and inculcated in the young people right from very early childhood. Values for, patriotic values, Pan-Africanist values, strong morals. These things don't seem to be the order of the day anymore. And most of us aren't ready to leave our comfort zones. We're not ready to sacrifice our personal interests. We talk about the leaders, being selfish and all that. We're not very different. As we said before, it seems to me that we are in each other's image, leaders and people alike. And the real progress demands rigor from citizens, not just from the top down, but also from the bottoms up. We need discipline, we need strict adherence to reforms. So can the young people decide for themselves that they are going to be the example, what can we do? And that's my question here. And I'm thinking, okay, 700 million people, you split that across the country. So each country has a significant number of young people that could engage in politics. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe we can't all be presidents, but how about we form associations and we decide amongst ourselves, okay, let's get into municipal elections, or, depending on how it's called in different countries, local elections. Let's be municipal councillors, let's be mayors, let's be in the parliament, let's be in the Senate. What would happen if young people decided to come together and say, okay, let's form our parties, let's choose amongst us befitting leaders, and let's send them out to be our leaders and represent us in the legislative, in the judiciary, and then hopefully at the executive level. Have we done that? Can we do that? And I know there's many countries doing that, and I see countries like Namibia where youth engagement is really strong. And but there's many of our countries where it seems to me that we're giving up even the attempt to try and say, okay, let's try to get into these things. And then let's try and fail there and say, okay, well, we tried and we failed. They crushed us, But again, the reason why I was talking about the population and the demographics is there's mostly young people. So it doesn't make sense to me that we cannot decide and come together and say, okay, well, if we found amongst ourselves a few people per region to represent us in, all these different organs of government, and then we go out to vote for the people that we're choosing to send forward. Can we do that? Is that a possibility? I'm wondering. But then just to say we're not ready for change, I'm thinking, well, most people wouldn't want to sacrifice their personal gain, their personal interest, their comfort zones. They'll tell you, well, I'm not going to have any this, any that, any advantages, yada, yada. And that would be fair because people have families to feed and, but at the end of the day, it's proving the point that we're not yet ready for that sacrifice. We're not yet ready to get our feet wet. So assuming we do find leaders, we do find representatives, we do get to a place where we have that anointed leader, or, each country has an anointed leader to guide us in the right direction. What do you think is the country is going to look like? A country that is headed towards transformation. What do you think that country looks like? There is rigor. People show up on time to work. People respect traffic lights. People don't litter around. They're clean, not just, in their businesses, but even in their homes. There's household management that is efficient. People at work are efficient. They offer the services in an honest manner. They don't accept bribes. They don't offer bribes, right? And if they do, in a normally functioning nation, well, you should be reporting anyone that's trying to bribe. Somebody in his post of duty should be serving with honor, fervor, and efficiency. That's what it's going to look like. Such a society would be, well, these are performance indicators for the quarter or for the year or for whatever. This is what we met. These are our targets. This is where we fell short. How can we improve the following year? We hold each other accountable. That's what it's going to look like. There's going to be rigor. I'm ready for that. Because I see a lot of laxity going on, not just with the leaders, even with us, the people. We're not ready for serious work, serious implementation. Are we ready for, hey, these are the moral laws we uphold as a people and strictly adhere to it? Or are we going to complain like, oh my God, this is so strict? I think of our transportation, in like interurban transportation. You can only carry a certain number of passengers in the public vehicles. Are we going to respect that? You can only sell in the specific lanes. Are we going to respect that? You can only, do this or do that. Are you going to respect that? That's what a rigorous society is going to look like. And that's what it's going to take for a change. Are we ready? So I'm asking the question again. Are we ready for economic reforms? Are we ready for transformation? Are we ready for change? Or are we going to resist change and only talk about wanting change? It's important for us to consider. And the more I meditate on it, the more I realize that maybe that's why we haven't had change just yet, because we're probably not ready to accept it. Because if someone came in and was rigorous in their approach, we would say, well, they're a dictator. And even if they weren't, but they were just strict in upholding law and order, we would say, well, these people aren't free. But should we be free to just do whatever we please? In a society okay, granted, I'm not for military rule, I'm not for authoritarianism, but what I'm saying is, for a change to happen, there's going to be some strict adherence to rules and regulations. It's going to be, well, here's a project, you deliver it as you should. In terms of planning budgets, in terms of devising plans, you're going to have to be honest. and report back to your authorities. And there's going to have to be follow-up of project implementation. If you set a timeline and you said, well, we're going to have this route done by so and so date, and then the person in charge is coming and checking, and you're only halfway gone whilst you've embezzled all of the money, there's going to be consequences. Are we ready? I'm asking again, are we, the young people, ready to, one, contribute in leadership by presenting ourselves and sacrificing our own personal pursuits? And two, are we ready to follow law and order in a strict manner? That's what a changed society is going to look like. That's what a society that transforms itself is going to look like. Young people from very young age, again, early childhood development, where we inculcate values in the young people and we tell ourselves these are the values we uphold. Can we even start there in how we manage basic things? Manage, if you have a small position of power, how you manage that, how you serve, if you're in public service, how you serve, and our companies. We're going to need to completely reform those. And I wonder, well, if we're talking about nationalization versus privatization of companies, who are we going to privatize to? If not exporting capital further, if we're taking external partnerships. So if government and if the local community is going to have to control things, we're going to have to be rigorous. We can't say, well, this is how we do things. No, we're going to have to be rigorous in the implementation. If we're implementing new technologies, we're going to have to do it in the proper manner. If we're proposing laws, signing laws in how we're running our businesses, we're going to have to be strict about it. Are we, the people, ready for rigor and moralization? Are we? If they say, well, this is how you do, you comply. If you don't, here are the consequences. Of course, I believe that the government should be able to incentivize people and reward people for a job well done, so as to reduce things like corruption and stuff like that. I believe that there, incentives and disincentives that we can put in place to control behavior in one way or another. However, are we going to have goodwill and moral uprightness to enact change at our own individual levels? If you work at the public service, are you going to show up to work on time and leave on time? Are you going to serve the people with efficiency? Or are you going to say, well, I couldn't care? And if you suddenly have a leader who is strict about results, and of course, to me, positions of power should be tied to result. If you say, well, you have 5 years to implement this, and within the 5 years you haven't, you should be able to step down. Are you ready to lose your position of power after 3, 4, 5 years of no results? That's what a rigorous state is going to look like. Are we ready for that? Are we ready to be the ones implementing that? Are we ready to receive that kind of rigor and rule of law? I'm asking. Until we are able to answer that question for ourselves, until we're able to say, yes, we are ready for rigor and moralization, we're ready for strict adherence to rules and regulations and policy, we're ready to follow through our projects in the most efficient and the most productive manner, then we'll be ready for change. Until then, yes, we can hold our current leaders accountable, but they're not going to be leaders forever. We're going to have to be leaders tomorrow, and if we do not have the right mindset, I promise you, we're going to be repeating the mistakes of our predecessors, and the same way they did theirs, and the people before them. So it's our problem that we lack, proper leaders. We lack people that can conduct and lead a country or a nation or a continent in the right direction. What is it? And as young people, if we were to take action and say, okay, among us, who are those who are interested in, serving the people? Not for personal interest, but truly serving the people. Are we going to find amongst each other honest and virtuous leaders who only care about the advancement and the development of the collective? Until we answer that question, I'm so sorry to break it to you, we're not going to have any change we're dreaming about. I think about it every day when I wake up and I ask myself, what is it that I can do? Because I know for a fact that I'm not sacrificing enough, if at all. And I'm asking you to ask yourself that question. Do you feel concerned, or are your problems bigger? And until all our problems are bigger than the general, than the collective, we are going to stay where we are. Until we all decide that okay, let's take action, we are going to stay where we are. We're going to whine about it year in, year out, generation after generation, generation in, generation out. We're going to whine about it. And until, I don't know, I'm going to leave it at that and say we can only hope for the best. And I'm calling all those who are interested. We can brainstorm and think about, can we come together and form some sort of a tangible, are we willing to? Are we ready to sacrifice our own personal interests, our own personal pursuits? And it's not to say that everybody should do that or that we should all abandon or, even morally, you should take care of your family first. You should take care of yourself first. But I'm saying that, can we find amongst ourselves people who are willing and ready to get their feet wet, to get their hands dirty? And if the answer is no, or for as long as the answer will be no, well, we know our fate. And we can only contend with the leaders that we have. Again, not to say we should stop calling them out or holding them accountable, but I'm saying that we can change an outcome with the same kind of thinking that created it to begin with. So an election is not the start and end of the solution. There's more to it. There's other ways people get involved. And I'm calling first for that pause and reflect moment, just so we can consider what's at stake. And secondly, how can we take action? We can start by changing how we think about these things. It's a good place to start. So thank you for watching today's episode. And I really hope that as we reflect on who we are as a people, and as we consider everything going on right now on the continent, the chaos, we should be able to think, when are we finally going to wake up? You think of the likes of the Thomas Sankaras, pretty young. You think of Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso, pretty young man, doing impressive work. We will get into the Burkina Faso specific analysis and what he's doing out there. Again, I'm not fully in support of military rule, but at least I can commend the work he's doing. And it's unfortunate that countries like Sudan, and there's a lot at stake with Sudan, and there's allegedly Saudi influence, and we can get into that, but what are we going to do as young Africans? Thank you for watching.